Hello and welcome to the first of a new segment. What don't pilots tell you? CrayonBox Ground School. So today we're going to look at thermals. And what's a thermal? Well, a thermal is a rising pocket of air that is less dense or warmer than the air around it. How does this come about? Well, in basic terms, the sun heats the ground, and as the warm air above the ground heats and becomes lighter, more buoyant than the air surrounding it, it gets enough energy to lift off the ground and rise into the atmosphere. So let's have a look at that on the drawing here. So here we have the ground along here. So we'll draw as we go. Let's do that green. So here's the ground, and along the ground we might have a paddock, a field that's been ploughed, and that paddock might be darker. Well, that could be water. Let's use red. So that paddock could be this red colour here, and that will warm up faster. So when the sun heats the, we haven't got yellow, but when the sun heats that ground, and the energy goes into that ground, this ground heats up and the air over it warms up and wants to rise. Now what happens then is, we'll use red for the rising air and everything, it has to overcome the resistance of the air around the area above it and beside it, because what it's trying to do when it rises is pull in air from around it. And if that air is restricting the rising of this warm air, it can't go. But it only takes a little something to trigger a thermal release. And once the thermal releases, it gets warm enough. Maybe there's a trough in the atmosphere that causes a rift, that causes it to be able to break free. And this air up here is disrupted in such a way that the thermal rises. And sometimes wind over a ridge will cause that little ripple effect that causes this rupture to occur, and the buoyancy takes over. So what happens once this thing gets enough energy, it starts to go. It starts to rise more and more, and then it suddenly just goes woof, and it goes up into the atmosphere. And it reaches a point in the atmosphere, let me just grab the pen. So it reaches a point where it's equal in temperature and it forms clouds, and that's called, I don't even know what it's called, you gotta look that up. So this is where it becomes neutrally buoyant with the air around it, and that's where you'll see the white clouds on a summer's afternoon. That's where they stop, and that's why they're all on the same layer, because that temperature has equalized and the buoyancy has equalized. There's a lot more going on here, but that's the general gist of what a thermal is and how it works. In order, again, for it to be able to go up, the cooler air has to be pulled in from the sides. And what also happens is, as this air goes up, it pushes air aside. And air will actually have to go down around the thermal. This is called sink. Lift and sink. And the sink, if we look down on a thermal, not really, it doesn't look really like this, but here you've got, say, I'll draw it over here. If you look down on the thermal, there's the warmed ground. Here's the rising packet of air in the middle. And around the outside, you've got the sink going down to fill in underneath the rising buoyant air that's come up. You've got to really think of weather patterns as a three-dimensional thing. And when you start to understand that weather is 3 dimensions, you start to understand what's going on in the atmosphere. Why is this important to flying? Because when I'm flying along, or any of us are flying as a pilot, when we hit the sink, we go down. When we hit the lift, we start to rise again. And then when we hit the sink again on the other side, we go down. And you'll quite often feel quite sharp turbulence caused by the lifting warm air. And you'll actually even smell, even at 4,000 or 5,000 feet, the grasses and the pollens and the pastures and everything. Sometimes if you're over a cow farm, I don't need to expand on that, you can smell everything wafting up from way down on the ground. And that's because that thermal's lifting it all into the air, including dust. At this layer here too, you'll often see something called an inversion layer, which is where the dirty air stops and above it's all clean air. That's because overnight, all the dirty air hasn't been able to go any higher, it's stopped, and it can't rise, the thermals aren't allowing it to rise above that layer. That's all we've got time for, just a short one, thermals. Hope you enjoyed that, and there'll be more to come soon. Thanks for watching.